read that right. What you're seeing on the screen right now, it terrifies me. So, for context, I normally do Capcom content on this channel, but there's something I really need to talk about, guys. It's going to be a really embarrassing video to make. I imagine most of you are going to laugh at me, but I wanted to make this video because I imagine there's someone out there who feels the same way I do, right? I might as well come out and say it, man. I'm terrified of long games. That's the brutal truth. I just don't want to touch a really long game. This video is going to be talking solely about my experience. You know, I'm not trying to convince other people to like short games. I'm not saying liking long games is a bad thing. If anything, I'm envious of you if you can sit down and play a long game. It's just, I don't know why this terrifies me, but hopefully when I'm recording this, I can kind of piece it together as I talk about my feelings. What you are seeing right now on the screen is Final Fantasy VII Remake, and this is actually very important to this story I'm about to tell you. Flashback to high school. So this is almost an entire decade ago. It's been quite a while since I was last in high school. I was in love with RPGs, man. I couldn't get enough of that shit. I was playing Dying Light. I was playing shit like Far Cry. I was playing like Earthbound. I was playing all sorts of RPGs. I even tried to play Pokemon. When I was younger, I was playing all the big games. I loved RPGs and I loved open world. And when those two things came together, god damn it, I wanted that game so badly. And when Fallout 4 came out, holy shit, that changed my entire life. At that point in time, I hadn't played Fallout 3. Now, I did play New Vegas and I did play Skyrim, but not Fallout 3. So I didn't really have any like expectations as to what Fallout 4 probably should have been, like most people. I wasn't expecting it to lean too heavily on the RPG mechanics, but I was just infatuated with that open world. It was just so big. There was so much turn your brain off kind of shit to do in that game. I'm not shitting you, on my original Xbox One save, I spent like 7 real life days playing that game. Let me do the math on that real quick. Yeah, 168 hours on one character. That's one character. I also played survival mode. I had several characters. Point being, around this time, there were a lot of really large scale open world games for me to enjoy. And Xbox Games for Gold wasn't helping. They frequently would put Assassin's Creed games on there, I would remember. And occasionally there would be like a Far Cry game. There was all sorts of just open world goodness. Oh shit, another one is Dead Island. Dead Island, I played a lot of that game too. The point I'm trying to convey is I played a lot of these massive games that took a lot of time to just sit down and complete. And an important detail is I did all of this in high school. Now, obviously, I'm a much different person now than I was in high school. For one, I didn't really have a job or any responsibility in high school, at least not until I got a little older. So I basically had just this huge unmoderated amount of time that I could just sit down and play a video game. And the only thing taking time out of that was going to school, which I was very bad at school. I happen to be kind of a lolcow connoisseur, and one line that kind of stuck out to me when I was learning about Chris Chan was his mother said something about how your perspective changes quite drastically over the course of 7 years. And wow, what a funny coincidence. I graduated from high school quite a number of years ago. A lot of key things happened in that time. First of all, I got a job. Second of all, I became a more responsible person in general. But also, I think my taste in games just kind of started to become different. It kind of started to change. There was a brief period in like 2014 to 2016 where basically all I did was play like single player games, except for like the few open world games I mentioned, like Dying Light. And then I'd say 2017 onward, I really started to better appreciate single player games. And that's where I started playing like a lot of like smaller games. Around that time, I started to really get into games like Wolfenstein and Doom and Resident Evil and all of those kinds of games, you know, just those big AAA single player experiences that weren't very long. As a matter of fact, I actually really like Wolfenstein 2, which is funny because the number one criticism for that game is the fact that it is so short. But I really started to deviate away from the RPGs that I used to like for so many years. All of a sudden, instead of Borderlands, I was playing BioShock, and instead of Dying Light, I was playing Mirror's Edge. Well, the first one, not the not Catalyst or whatever it was called. It was also right around that period where I started making my own money, but it was mostly disposable money. So I didn't really have any gripes about buying a game and then finding out it's kind of short, which I imagine is the reason people want bigger, more content-filled games, because they are getting kind of expensive these days. While I am really happy that I learned to appreciate shorter games, the problem is after this transition, I left a lot of longer games behind. And this is where games like Final Fantasy VII start to come in. And Final Fantasy VII is sadly not the only one. I'm also thinking of like, oh, I don't know, I get the same hesitation when I look at The Witcher or like, man, just... Okay, look, I'm going to scroll through my library right now, okay? I'm going to scroll right through it. I'll list off the games that I... Oh, no. I'm already seeing some. Oh. Okay. But, like, when am I going to find the time? Dude, when am I going to find the time to play all the Darksiders games? Like, seriously, how do I own all of these? How am I going to play any of these? Deus Ex, I'll never finish that. Borderlands 3, that's going to be once in a blue moon. Rage 2, come on. Why did I buy this game? I'm getting, like, genuinely pissed just scrolling up. Final Fantasy 15? Metal Gear Survive. Dude, I'm scrolling through all these games that, like, I would love to play, but, like, Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War, come on. When am I gonna play these? Okay, ironically, I have been playing Cyberpunk. I don't know how I've been doing it, but I had to pick the worst game out of all of them, apparently. Actually, that's not true. I just saw Metal Gear Survive. But yeah, I mean, did you hear how, like, kind of mauled I got just scrolling down my Steam library? When am I gonna play those games? I don't fucking know. Do I feel like I wasted my money? I don't even know, because I might play those games and I might really like them. I might not. But here's why Final Fantasy VII is the most relevant here. I have the Final Fantasy VII Windows port on Steam. I have Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade. I have Final Fantasy VII Reunion on Steam. Then I have Crisis Core. Then I have Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade again on the PS5. Then I have the PS1 Final Fantasy VII. I mean, Jesus Christ, I apparently really like buying this game given I've never played it. That is until today anyways. And this is where all the terror comes in. Final Fantasy VII has been like my biggest demon for so many years. I've just never been able to bring myself to play this fucking game. It's not because I hear it's a bad game, because I hear it's an amazing game, and it certainly seems like an amazing game. I'm playing it now and I'm really liking it so far, so I'm not entirely sure why I put it off so much. It wasn't because I didn't have access to it. At first, I thought the reason I was avoiding playing it was because, you know, I didn't want to hog up the PS5. My PS5's hooked up in my living room. It's not really in my own room. So mentally in my mind, it's kind of like, well, if I'm on the PS5, no one else can use the PS5, you know, and that's kind of a problem for me for some reason. But then I bought it on PC and I still didn't play it. And then I thought, oh, okay, maybe I just have anxiety about being able to run it well, right? I played this game the first time I ever launched it, it was on my 6800 XT. I was getting like, I think the resolution was like 3600 by 1800 or some shit. I was using the built-in FSR with the AMD drivers. Anyways, I was doing that and I was getting like a completely solid like 120 FPS, like zero performance issues at like max settings. And then I thought it was just the fact that I didn't want to get interrupted, because after all, you know, I'm working 40 hours a week. It's a pretty big game. So when my 4090 came in, I took a vacation from work and I didn't play the game. This reason would end up being the closest though, because eventually I had to do some self-reflection, I guess you could say, kind of like I'm self-reflecting right now. And I realized that the reason I was doing this was anxiety about committing to this game. And it's weird because I don't really mind commitment. I've never had a problem with that before. I guess it's just the fact that I'm committing to a video game. It just feels weird, you know, but I'm not even sure about that, because while I'm afraid to play a long game, I'm not afraid to play a short game for a long time. I can beat the campaign of Devil May Cry 5 in like 3 hours, and you know, let's do a live reaction. How many hours do I got in this game? 234. So apparently my brain is okay with dedicating 234 hours to a 3-hour long game. However, it doesn't want to commit 40 hours to a 40-hour long game. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I don't even know how I spent 200 hours in this game. That's insane. I don't even feel like I play video games that much. How in the world do some of you motherfuckers have 1,000 hours in this game, by the way? Like, seriously, how in the fucking world do you do that? Back on topic. This is where we get to the end of the story. So you know what eventually made me want to play Final Fantasy VII? The PlayStation 1. For some reason, I had a craving for PlayStation 1 games. So I sat down and I played the entire Resident Evil trilogy on PS1, and it was pretty sick. I played RE1 and 2 before, but I've actually never beaten 3, so I beat 3. That was pretty cool. Some of the boss fights in that game are very sadistic, though. I don't know what on earth they were thinking. After that was done, I had beaten Metal Gear Solid 1, and I had a ton of fun with that game as well, but after all was said and done, it came down to 2 choices. It was between Silent Hill and it was between Final Fantasy VII. And Final Fantasy VII started off on a really bad foot. The game is 3 discs, so you know right away the game's going to be a big one. When I looked it up on how long to beat, it said the game was a whopping 38 hours. And I'm telling you, I was almost not having it. I almost picked Silent Hill, and then I had an idea. It's the most unique way to pick out a video game you could possibly think of. Which fan base is the least cringe? That is the question I asked myself. I don't know why that was a determining factor. It just was. And it made me think of the several times I've just been trying to talk about survival horror games. Like I'll be sitting there in like a horror chat with some people, and we'll be talking about Outlast, we'll be talking about Dead Space, we'll be talking about Resident Evil, and it was always the Silent Hill guy. It was always the fucking Silent Hill dude that nobody could fucking stand. It was always the Silent Hill guy who was a NEET and who was really annoying. No offense to Silent Hill fans, it's just that's been my experience with those guys for some reason. I know I shouldn't let like the fan base of a game give me a sour taste for a game, but once I remembered that, I was like, fuck Silent Hill. So yeah, thanks to a really unfortunate experience I ran into with a NEET, I played Final Fantasy VII instead. And in a really weird way, I'm glad I chose that extremely strange method of picking my game. I booted up OG Final Fantasy VII, and I decided the game was going to be way too big to play on my personal computer. So I actually moved DuckStation and all of my ROMs onto my Steam Deck. And that was another really cool thing about my experience with this game. It was the first game I ever played exclusively on my Steam Deck. My totally 100% legal ROMs, by the way. Don't sue me. We wouldn't want Square Enix to hear that somebody who bought like every fucking version of Final Fantasy VII maybe downloaded the original. Anyways, I was having an amazing time with this game, but while I was having a lot of fun, I was also having a lot of really strange anxiety. I spent an entire Sunday playing that game on my Steam Deck. I don't know if I was getting nauseous looking at the tiny screen for like, what was it, like 8 hours I was playing that game? I'm not sure. But like, I remember going to bed that night and literally not being able to sleep. I actually had extreme insomnia, which is weird because I've been sleeping pretty good for the past year, and my mind was filled with this incredibly terrifying thought that, holy shit, how long is it going to take me to beat this game? I want to beat this game. I kept telling myself that I wanted to beat this game, but it took me 6 hours just to get out of Midgar. So I mean, I was lying there literally not being able to sleep because I was worried about how long it was going to take me to beat this game. Why I was so concerned about beating it as fast as possible, I'm not even sure, because I was enjoying it. This was a game I was having a lot of fun playing. So why I was trying to beat it as fast as possible, I have zero idea. Can you start to sense just how irrational and like weirdly life impeding this fear is? I had work the next day and I was tired out of my mind, and I was not able to work just because I played a good game. I think part of it is me being worried that I'm going to be stuck playing this game forever, that I'm going to have to commit a lot more attention to it than I usually would like to. I'm kind of a variety of person. It's really hard for me to stick with one thing for like a long period of time. So in my mind, every time I wanted to boot up a Steam Deck, I'd be like, oh, I have to play Final Fantasy VII again. Very weird, because I really like the game, but I would sigh and I'd be like, oh, I have to play Final Fantasy VII, and I'd be like, oh, can't I just play Spyro? Can't I play Silent Hill? Can't I play Crash? You know, that kind of thing. It's just so bizarre, but you know, I kept playing at the game a few more nights, and I really started to get into it. I started to feel comfortable with what I was doing, and I managed to sit down and talk myself into this and be all like, hey, you're enjoying playing this game. Maybe don't worry about it so much. And now as I'm recording this, I'm finally at the point where I'm like, yeah, I can kind of just pick up the game whenever I want to. You know, not a big deal. I've completely bypassed, just completely jumped over all of that initial anxiety I had, which is so crazy because it felt like it ruled my life. It felt like it greatly limited how many games I could play. After playing some Final Fantasy VII, guess what other game I sat down and played? I started playing survival games again, and specifically I'm playing Valheim right now, and I'm spending a lot of time playing Valheim. And again, I usually don't like playing survival games because it's the same anxiety. It's like, what on earth am I going to do? This game is so big, there's so many things for me to do. It's that anxiety plus analysis paralysis. It's like I boot up Minecraft and I'm like, okay, but what the fuck do I do? But yeah, I'm just really enjoying Valheim now. So what was the point of this entire epilogue I went on to? I kind of wanted to highlight that I started from the same place as a lot of people. I know a lot of people really prefer longer games and don't really play a lot of shorter games. Well, okay, maybe that's not true. They just don't like paying full price for a short game. For some reason, I'm willing to do that. But yeah, I feel like a lot of people go through this thing where they play a lot of games in high school. They eventually kind of get a life, you know, they lose their virginity eventually. And it's kind of, they eventually don't have as much time to play games, yet I still come across like a lot of these people who still play these big games. And I've always wondered, how do you do it? How do you play a big game? You know, I work 40 hours and I like help out my family and all sorts of stuff. It's like, and then I make YouTube videos on the side, and it's like, how am I supposed to find the time for any of this? How do you find time for any of this? But I'm starting to realize now that time was always there. It's just I was spending it being scared. The time that I sat there debating on whether I should play a game, I could have just downloaded and booted up the game and gave it a genuine try and see what happens. I came from the same place as most people, yet I developed this fear of playing long games, whereas it felt like a lot of people my age started to get more and more invested in games. It's kind of like how people will watch an entire show, you know? I don't have a lot of coworkers that watch a variety of shows. They usually have a specific one that they really like, that they talk to all their friends about. The biggest example being like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I know tons of coworkers who just really are into those kinds of movies. They're constantly talking about them. But to sit down and watch every Marvel movie, that's quite a time commitment. But they're able to make that commitment because they see greater value in investing that time into one single thing that they enjoy more, as opposed to spreading it around like I've been doing. And then sometimes I wasn't even spreading it around. I would take a short game and I would just play it several times, which I think is a really good skill to develop. You know, you should be okay with playing a short game a couple times. You shouldn't demand that every game be a very long one, but at the same time, I can understand why people would want a longer game, because I mean, you're dropping 70 bones on it. It better be something substantial, you know? Sadly, it leads to a lot of like brute force padding and shit like that that developers do. That's for a separate video. I don't want to get too negative, but this is long enough. We'll bring my qualms with padded out games to a different video. But that was the thing that fascinated me. I came from the same place. I had the same time struggle as other people, but yet I couldn't play long games and other people were able to. And I feel I finally found this answer. You know, I finally slayed this demon, so to speak. And that just leaves me desiring to ask, has anyone else felt this way before? And are they still maybe struggling with it? Because I've always kind of felt alone in this fear. A lot of my friends really like longer games and they don't like to play a lot of shorter ones. I don't know. I'm hoping that to some degree this is relatable to someone, because part of me there has to be someone out here who has the same problem, you know? If you couldn't relate, or maybe instead you wish you played more shorter games instead of playing a lot of longer games, maybe you feel like that. I mean, go ahead and leave it in the comments below. I really like talking about these kinds of things. Every time I upload a video, I'm actually really surprised with the kind of comments I get, because they're usually very insightful. They're usually very awesome comments. So please, if you got something to say, absolutely leave it in the comments section down below. I make an effort to reply to every single one, and I'm really looking forward to what people are going to say about this one. Maybe I'm alone, maybe I'm not. That's mostly what I want to find out. Can't promise I'll make a lot of non-Capcom stuff like this video, you know, just general industry commentary, I guess you could say. If you found this video randomly, but you also happen to like Capcom stuff, maybe consider subscribing. I'm actually starting an entire new series this year, and I'm hoping to make a lot of cool stuff. If you're here at the very end, thank you so much. Wait a minute. One of my favorite games is a long game.
Run back to mama, boy! Ah, come on!
How many hours do I have in this one? Why?